Now, I'm proud of you. But I will not accept losing with you. Because there's only one thing they judge us on. There's only one thing people remember. And it ain't how we play the game. Winning is everything.
Raiders show blitz, and here they come. Wells looks right, throws deep that way, wants Gamage back of the end zone. He's juggling it, and he grabs it, and it's a touchdown for the Thundering Herd. Long count, snap and a drop back for O'Hara. Lobs one to the left sideline. He gets the ball through at the 20. It's complete. Across the 15, hit and fumbles, and Marshall comes out with a football. Stephen Gilmore recovers the fumble. Markel Tinsley let it loose. 28-yard line, the shotgun snap to Wells. Has good protection, throws deep for Gamage, left side of the end zone. He leaps, and Corey Gamage has it. Touchdown Herd. The snap, the give up the middle, big hole for Sheldon Evans. Bounces left at the 20, turns it up at the hash mark. 15, 10, 5, touchdown Herd. Sheldon Evans, 26 yards on the run. Here's the snap, blitz comes, but Wells was rolling away from the start. Still drifting right, throws to the back of the end zone for Willie Johnson, trying to drag a foot. What do we have? Touchdown Herd.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. I got Trace with me here. We're going to recap Marshall's emotional weekend. That word gets used a whole lot, and, rightfully so. It is a pretty emotional weekend. You start to come and access feelings that you really don't access for most of the year outside of this week if you're a Marshall fan. And while it's centered around a tragedy, oftentimes the feelings that come bubbling out are a little bit more of pride and of I don't know what it's mostly pride and joy, really, is what it is, because you get to go to the stadium and you get to see the Herd take the field, and you actually get to see them continue to compete, and in most cases nowadays, on 75 week at least, win. So just an all around great week for Marshall athletics, Marshall University, the Huntington community. There's a lot of national attention that gets put on this game and that community in particular this week. And the Herd did not disappoint on the field. Middle Tennessee came in owning a 2-game win streak against Marshall. Marshall really needed to try to figure it out against the Raiders and, assert their dominance back over a team that is a perennial 500 team. And they did that. But in the early going of the game, it was a little bit, I don't want to say it was shaky, but it was like, man, what the heck's going on here? Marshall didn't seem to be very sharp on offense. The defense was okay. They looked as advertised. But, early on, I don't think you will disagree with me here, Trace, that Grant Wells looked inaccurate. He was throwing balls high. He was missing. They were trying to take deep shots all the time, and he was just not very accurate. But, boy, when the second quarter rolled around, it was like night and day for him. He really locked in and zeroed in and became pretty darn lethal for the remainder of the game, and set career highs in all the major passing categories on an individual basis for himself. So let's talk about that. 42-14 is what Marshall gets the win by. Very comfortable lead. Both of us were pretty close in predicting that score prediction. I'm sorry, in our score predictions. We were in that neighborhood. We didn't quite hit it on the head. I had Marshall scoring more points but giving up more points, and you were right there with me. But, hey, it is what it is, 42-14. You'll take that every week of every season for the remainder of life.
Yes.
Herd moves to 7-0, remains undefeated, 4-0 in conference, a firm grip on the Eastern Division right now, owning the tiebreaker over Florida Atlantic, and cruising. I mean, the Herd is cruising. So, Trace, before we talk about some stats, I know you were at the game. I saw some of the videos that you posted, saw some of the pictures that you posted around campus, and I know it was nice to be back there, particularly on 75 week. You go to all the games, but this is a little bit different. This is a different feel in the air. We've talked about that a lot. It's just not your standard green and white hooting and hollering and tailgating and giving it hell for lack of a better term. They go all out for 75 week, and they really do it right. So talk to me about the week. Talk to me about what you saw, some of those things that generally only seem to pop up during 75 week, and then we'll talk stats.
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, this was definitely one of the most satisfying kind of weekends of a Marshall game, like most enjoyable Marshall Saturdays I've ever had for sure. I mean, it absolutely was. They did it so well. They always do, but this year it was particularly different. I mean, it just had a different feel in the air about it. The fans, usually fans don't like showing up early to games. Everybody was already in that stadium because they wanted to see that intro. That's one thing I noticed early on is that, a lot of times people show up like after the game's already started, which I've never understood for the life of me. But now most people were there before the game started, and they wanted to see that take it all in. And of course, I ended up going to all the 3 different locations, the crash site, the Spring Hill Cemetery, and then, of course, the fountain. I had to go to the fountain afterwards because it was such a crowded thing because they had the ceremony and everybody was over there and had to wait till after the game to do that. But everybody, I mean, you could just see it. Everybody was extremely honorable about the situation. They really wanted to pay their respects, which is awesome. I mean, we went up the cemetery there kind of early, and it was really good. I mean, it was awesome to see all the support, all the mementos and all the different things that people, little trinkets that people would leave just to, and I, did that as well. And just little things like that go a long way. And it was really a special, special Saturday for sure. Especially because it's the 50th anniversary. I mean, that's only going to come once ever. I mean, that's a very big milestone year. And, it couldn't have gone any better, honestly. And as far as a couple of things with the game, it's very interesting that it turns out that, like we've all seen and, people have tweeted, that Marshall ran 75 plays, which, of course they did. And then,
yeah,
of course they did. And then and like you said, somebody else saying that they're 7-0 on 11-14, because of course they are. So
yeah,
stuff like that, it happens every year. And I was looking at my Time Hop app on my phone earlier, and I said basically the same exact thing about last year's game against La Tech. Same type of deal. And then a lot of those weird plays that happened in the game, a lot of those turnovers and stuff were kind of inexplicable on Middle's part in a lot of ways. You don't usually see a guy try to field the punt and then get smacked and then Marshall recover inside the 10. You don't usually see that play. And a lot of things like that happen. It's just weird stuff. And you definitely have to think that there's more to some of that than just coincidence. But that's what makes it so cool, is that you just can never predict what's going to happen. But as far as, the game itself, yeah, it was obviously really good. But then, but really what stood out to me the most was what it was like the whole day before the game and after. That's what really stood out to me the most. And then, of course, having that coach's pole trophy there was awesome. I mean, a big line for that. Everybody getting the pictures with that and so forth. It was just a really big day. It was a really big day, and it was enjoyable as all get out.
Yeah, it was really cool to see a lot of the stuff that I saw. Of course, I was at home and I watched the game, but on social media, it was like just about every type of, major sports outlet had some kind of video package, had some kind of, extended little video that they put out. And it was cool. I watched everyone that I could find, and they were all a little bit different. While they were the same, they were still all a little bit different, and all of them were really well done.
Yeah.
So it would have been cool to have been there, but logistically, it just wasn't going to happen for me this year. With what everything is going on, and the other things we have planned, and the holidays are closing in. It would have been nice if I was still in the Bowling Green area, if I was still in the Huntington area. This would have been a no-brainer. Would have been there without a doubt. Would have been there early, taking it all in, seeing everything that I could possibly see, and wanting to be inside Jones C. Edwards Stadium to experience what went on from the opening kickoff to the final whistle. So let's talk about that, because that in and of itself, we talked in the preview that the game is almost secondary this week. Yeah. And boy, it was like center stage. I mean, at noon, that was what was happening in Huntington, and boy, the herd did not disappoint. The 4 major indicators, 520 yards to 303 just for Middle Tennessee. Marshall put on a really good offensive performance. Time of possession, the herd goes over plus 10 in time of possession. 35-14 for the herd, 24-46 for Middle Tennessee. First downs, also all Marshall, 26-18. And turnovers. 3 for Middle Tennessee, just 1 for Marshall. It's kind of weird also in this game that both guys Both teams have a fumbled, muffed punt return that led to a touchdown deep in the opponent's territory, but that's what happened. Couple of indicators outside of those yardages, just bullet point type stuff, things you need to talk about and mention. Marshall's defense allowed 56 rush yards still through 7 games. Still in 2020 has not allowed a 100-yard team to run 100-yard rusher or 100 yards to a team. Brendan Knox has his streak of 100-yard consecutive rushing games ended at 5, and he had his streak of touchdowns ended. I think that's at 3, maybe 3 or 4. I'm not sure. We talked about this being a must-win game for Marshall, but not in the fashion that most games are a must-win game. Most of them are a must-win game to save your season or to, remain bowl eligible, and all that stuff is well in hand for Marshall. This is a must-win game because it was the 50th anniversary of 75 week. It's 75 week period. You can't win that, or you can't lose that. And Doc Holliday says that. He said it again in the post-game interview. He said, how'd you like to be a coach of a game you can't lose? And that's exactly what this game is. You cannot lose it. The questions would just be relentless and endless if you were happen to lose this game, especially coming in undefeated against Middle Tennessee, a 2-win ball club. And lastly, the outpouring of support across the nation on a number of fronts was pretty amazing. From the fans of all teams all over the country saying, we are all Marshall today, to all the news outlets reporting on the story, to all the fans across the country just dogpiling on game day every time they would tweet anything about the Masters. It was great. I mean, they screwed up, and I hope that they feel the ire of that from a lot of fans for a long time, because that was a global screw up on their part. And I'm glad that Marshall went out and dominated. I'm glad that the event got the proper amount of coverage that it did, because it just proves once again that you don't need ESPN. They don't want anything to do with these smaller schools. If they don't have your contract, if they can't sell $1 billion in advertising, then they don't want anything to do with you, regardless of how touching and how heartfelt the story is. But it is what it is. Trace, let's talk about some stats, and then I can't wait to get these grades. I got a feeling this is going to be like honor roll type report card. So let's just get into it. Grant Wells, career day for Grant Wells, and why not? 75 week, why not have your young quarterback have a career day in all the major passing categories? 25 of 35 passing on the day, 337 yards, count them, 5 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, another 8 carries for 39 yards. That is career highs in attempts, completions, yardage, and touchdown passes for Grant Wells. The kid was on fire after starting kind of rough in the first quarter. He did the bulk of that damage in the second quarter and third quarter because, hey, man, it was the Luke Zaban show for the latter part of the fourth. So basically in a half, 2.5 quarters, he put up those numbers. Brendan Knox, still the leading rusher, 16 carries, 70 yards. Again, had the 100-yard consecutive game streak snapped, had the touchdowns consecutive streak snapped. But how fitting is it that Brendan Knox ends with 70 rushing yards? It's another one of those numbers that pops up. Sheldon Evans, 5 carries, 39 yards, did find the end zone one time. Good for Sheldon. That's back-to-back games for him with a rushing touchdown. Willie Johnson, another career day for a Herd player. 8 catches, career high for Willie. 137 yards, career high for Willie. 2 touchdowns, career high for Willie. And to throw another one of those stats for 75 week on, I saw Chuck McGill tweet that this was the first game that a Marshall receiver has gone over 100 yards receiving since, guess when? Yeah, 75 week of 2019. Because of course it is, Trace. Of course it is. Artie Henry, 5 catches for 63 yards. Corey Gamage, a great day. 5 catches, 62 yards, 2 touchdown receptions. Both of them were SC top 10 worthy, and one of them was absolutely fitting to be put on the Most segment. That second touchdown was pretty darn awesome. Hayden Hagler, good to see him catch a touchdown. The young tight end, 1 reception, 1 yard, 1 touchdown. That's probably the greatest stat line of the season so far.
Yes.
All in all, Marshall racks up 520 yards, no turnovers on offense. Pretty positive day for the Herd all the way around, with the exception of one thing I've got to talk about. And I'm sure you remember this, but this one's sticking for all the positive stuff that happened in this game. This one play is sticking in my head. And for all the pub and all the stuff that we talk about Herd O-line and Brendan Knox and how great they are, and they are, he got stopped on a 4th and 1.
Yeah.
That was just kind of upsetting. I thought, wow, that was less than a yard. You can't move these guys out of the way. And I saw the replay, and it wasn't a typical Brendan Knox type run. He grabbed the ball and essentially tried to dive immediately for that first down. And I'm thinking, man, you can run into the back of Alex Millette or Will Ulmer or something like that and fall forward for, a foot and get that first down. But that was disappointing. But really, honestly, that was like it. That was like it for the Marshall offense. That was disappointing. On the defensive side, Trace, Najee Johnson is the leader in the clubhouse. 13 tackles, 9 solo, 1 forced fumble, and he recovered that very same fumble. And I saw that Steve Cotton tweeted out that was Najee Johnson's 200th career tackle at Marshall, was that play where he punched the ball out and recovered the fumble. How about that for making the 200th tackle count? Tavonte Beckett doing what Tavonte Beckett does, 11 tackles, 3 solo, half a tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hurries, and 2 more fumble recoveries. Jiminy Christmas. This guy is like a magnet when it comes to fumbles on the ground. Stephen Gilmore, 8 tackles, 6 solo, 2 passes defended. Jalen McLean, 6 tackles, 4 solo, half tackle for loss, 1 pass defended. And Darius Hodge, 6 tackles, 2 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, and 3 quarterback hurries. He was literally inches away from multiple sacks, literally inches. All in all, 65 rush yards for the Herd as a defense, 3 fumble recoveries on the ground, holding Asher O'Hara. They did a good job against O'Hara. He racked up a few passing yards, but they still kept him under 100 yards on the ground, kept the team under 100 yards on the ground. Solid effort for the Herd defense for sure. Great time, Trace. I know you're pumped and ready to do this because, man, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. So let's hear this grade for the young quarterback tying the record for consecutive wins to start a career. Grant Wells now 7-0, tying Chase Litton for the lead. Of course, what was it? Cresser goes 14-0 to start his career. I saw Steve Carton tweet out, and that was, of course, FCS era. So in the FBS era, it's Litton and it's Grant Wells starting the career at the 7-0. What do you got for Wells this week?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you can give him anything but an A this week. I mean, it was absolutely a great performance, and it really, like you said, it started it off for the first half. He was inaccurate, and it's crazy because he was inaccurate. This is the same reoccurring theme that I think I just said last week. I talk about how certain points of the game he's inaccurate. He still completes almost 68% of his passes. I mean, and that's a telling sign that he's having such great games, and you don't even necessarily realize how great they really are. And it seems like they can always be even greater. So that's probably a really good sign for him in the future. I mean, 25 of 37, 336 in the passing yard department, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. I mean, you can't ask for anything more than that. And I think this is 2 straight weeks that ESPN's kind of dogged him with QBR, 68 QBR. What? 68 QBR? Maybe they're taking into consideration that he was a little inaccurate in the first half, and maybe they're taking into consideration a couple, 2 or 3 of those passes that he had that were caught were maybe high, but I don't see how you could really factor that into it. Like I said, a little bit inaccurate there early on. He came out, it was almost like, I mean, of course, for a game like this, you're going to probably try harder. And sometimes you can try too hard. You try to force things a little bit, press a little bit. And after he kind of let the game settle in and just kind of played it, naturally without forcing it, he took over the game. I mean, he took advantage of the mismatches that they had at receiver. They couldn't stop Willie Johnson all day. Couldn't stop Corey Gamage. Already Henry had a big game, so I mean he took advantage of those and he started making some really nice throws. So if he would have been more accurate early, this would be a knockout A+. But just because of that, that's the only nitpick I can give Grant Wells this week. It's definitely an A performance.
I think that's a really good point you just made, and one that didn't occur to me fully until you just said that. And you're talking about a freshman quarterback who's experiencing as the starter his first 75 weeks. So it is kind of natural that you would be jittery to start, and then once you settle in, you start to see actually what Grant Wells is all about. So looking back on it now, it's not that surprising that you might be a little inaccurate. You might be a little erratic with the ball. And then once he settles in, it's like all those incompletions basically went away. I don't think he had but a handful, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 in the second half. Like all those incompletions came early. So that makes a lot of sense. So solid grade. I mean, as I'm scrolling my timeline while you're talking, I see that Grant Wells also earned a helmet sticker from college football final last night for his effort. So that's pretty nice. Nice little perk. But he's just cruising right along. It's great to see. It's really refreshing to see West Virginia kid leading the West Virginia-based program, especially one at Marshall that, really is the small town type close-knit community. They're the people's program. That's what I feel like. They're the people's program. How about offensively as a whole? We talked about it. 520 yards of total offense. No turnovers on the day, 42 points, all on the offensive side of the ball. What do you got for the Herd offense?
Yeah, much like Grant Wells is great. I have the offense as an A this week. I mean, really good performance. And even they started slow. I mean, they only had 7 points through the first quarter and a half. I mean, it took them a while to get going, but once they got going, middle had no answer at all. 42 points, 520 total yards, 336 passing. And even though Brendan Knox only had 70 yards, they still ran for 184 yards. Like that is very, very sneaky yardage because I did not think that they had enough on the ground to amass almost 200 yards rushing. That shows how really actually great they are at running the ball. Is when your top guy, one of the best running backs in the country, only has 70 yards, you still have almost 200 yards as a team. That just shows you have a lot of depth right there. And keep in mind that's without Kane Madden yesterday. And I don't know, did Josh Ball play?
Yep, he played, but he got hurt in the third quarter. So, I don't know how severe that is. Those are 2 points that are on my notes that I was actually going to talk about during this part of the program.
Yeah.
But yeah, he came out in the third quarter. It said it was a knee issue, but I don't know how severe or if it's, just one of those, all right, well, there's no need to trot back out there type things.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably their two best O linemen didn't play or didn't play very much. So that's, more telling that they ran for as much as they did. 26 first downs. They were around plus 11 in time of possession, which is good. 5 of 13 on third downs, a little off, but it's still, we really didn't make a difference in the game. Slower start offensively, but then with Middle, I'll give them a lot of credit because Middle has been gashed a lot this year, but they were not going to let Marshall beat them on the ground. They stacked the box like nobody else has done against Marshall this year. I mean, at one point, whenever they gave Brendan Knox the ball, I said, I don't feel like he's had the ball in 2 quarters. It felt like it took a long time for him to actually start getting the ball. So, and that really put a lot more pressure on Grant Wells to beat him through the air, which he did. That opened up the vertical passing game. He went deep a lot. I mean, I said this too, that's a big thing for Marshall's offense moving forward is now everybody looks at them and says, oh, well, they're a run first team. They're based around Brendan Knox and the O-line. Well, when Brendan Knox and the O-line isn't necessarily going, that shows that Grant Wells can beat you through the air and throw for 330 plus yards. That's a big thing for Marshall because now teams can't say, okay, we're going to have 8 in the box every play. You can't do that. You can't do that now. That's a big indicator right there for the defenses against Marshall moving forward. So a lot of good stuff from the offense. So I'll give them an A.
Yeah. Also, I mean, let's look at this. They did commit to the stop and the run, and they did a pretty good job of that to Middle Tennessee State. And you talked about it was obvious that they had decided, well, we're going to make Grant Wells try to beat us through the air. And I mean, I think that goes without saying that happened. 5 touchdown passes, 337 yards. But look, let me run down real quick this drive chart. All right, and I want to talk about real fast how this can get out of hand really quickly. All right, drive chart looks like for the Herd is 6 plays. Let's see, let me make sure I'm not getting the punt. The short, yeah, the first touchdown was 2 plays, 7 yards, 44 seconds. But after that, it was 6 plays, 60 yards, 2 minutes, 25 seconds. 4 plays, 47 yards, 1 minute. 4 plays, 92 yards, 1 minute, 34 seconds. And 3 plays, 65 yards, 1 minute, 11 seconds. And 3 plays, 50 yards, 1 minute, and 9 seconds. We're talking quick strike touchdowns. So if you want Grant Wells to beat you, Okay.
Let him beat you.
It looks like that's not going to be a problem. So defensively, we talked about how awesome they were yet again. Did not allow a 100-yard rusher, just over 300 yards of total offense, 3 turnovers. I mean, what do you got again for this Herd defense?
Yeah, I gave him an A. I mean, really good performance again. I mean, allowed 14 points, but only 7 of them were actually on them because 7 of those was from a special teams blunder. So, that's not on the defense. They allowed 303 total yards, which if you looked at that, you might say, well, that's a little bit more than they've been giving up. But like middle, I'll give them this. They had a really good game plan. I mean, you can tell that that's still the same offense they've been running the last few years because it's the short rollout passes, always putting a quarterback on the move. They've had athletic quarterbacks, Brent Stockstill, Ashley O'Hara. They roll them out of the pocket to avoid any kind of pressure that might get there. Quick passes, just pretty good tempo. You could tell they had the same game plan that they've been using for the last few years, and it worked at times decently. I mean, I will give them that. They had a good game plan. But Marshall's defense only gave up 56 yards rushing, 2.4 yards per rush, just nothing there at all. Forced 3 turnovers. Help force 3 turnovers. Really good stuff there. That was a big difference in the game. That helped them get the lead in the first place, was taking advantage of turnovers. Only 1 sack, but I mean, Asher O'Hara I think he's just such a good player. Like, he really impresses me. Really impressive game for him. I mean, even if it wasn't really like a huge game or a big game per se, it was an impressive game just because you know the type of defense he's going against. And they got him down 1 time. Marshall, they had 5 TFLs, 5 passes defended, 11 quarterback hurries. I mean, they got pressure. It's just he's so hard to get down. And most quarterbacks, they would have, if this was, if you get 11 quarterback hurries on an average quarterback that can't run like him, they probably get 4 or 5 sacks in this game. But because it's Asher O'Hara, who's very elusive, it was only 1 sack. So defense had a big challenge at their hands this week with the mobile quarterback that beat them last year. So they really succeeded well. So I'll give them an A.
Yeah, it was a good effort. And like I said, there were many plays that I can recall, and it's because they rolled out O'Hara that Hodge just could not quite get. I mean, it was like a millisecond after the ball gets released, Hodge is taking the guy down. But the pressure was there. Middle Tennessee did a great job of executing that RPO skinny post route. I mean, they lit Marshall up a couple times right down the seam with that skinny post route for big gainers. Yeah. And there's just not much you can do about that because that's a read play. That is absolutely a read play. And ultimately it didn't amount to much. Really Middle Tennessee was only able to mount 1 good drive. The other touchdown was basically gifted to them with a muff punt, but still a solid effort. All right. How about special teams? I didn't talk about special teams at all in the wrap or in the stat rundown, but we saw Shane Chucci miss a field goal. He was perfect again on extra points. Artie Henry fumbles a punt, but then again, he has several very exciting, very close to busting at loose punt returns. Robert Lefevre had a pretty good day punting the ball. And then again, we see kickoffs getting sailed out of bounds. That's 4 that I counted in the last 2 games, actually to the point that Marshall's kickoff specialist was pulled and that Robert Lefevre, the punter, was handed kickoff duties for the second half. So what do you got for special teams?
Yeah, I wasn't very impressed. I gave him a C. I was not very impressed with it. Now, the positives were good. I mean, obviously, they forced that 1 turnover, which led to Marshall's first touchdown inside the 10 there. That was obviously great. Punt returning was good. Artie Henry had a really good day punt returning. Like, he had that one at the 42-yard return, and he was extremely close to completely breaking that all the way. I mean, really good. I mean, with Talik Keaton out, they found a guy that they can rely on in place of him, and he was a first-team all-conference punt returner. So they have Artie Henry back there now, who's looking like he might be the next, maybe not the next because he's a senior, but I mean, the guy that could fill in his role. But there were some negatives, you could say. 0-1 on field goals. I mean, he had the leg for that kick. He just missed it left in the fourth quarter. The game was already over. They were 6-6 on extra points, so that was good. Chucci, 39.6 yards per punt was okay. He had a couple punts that were kind of just like not the best. They kind of just fluttered a little bit. So not great there. there was a fumbled punt return from R.D. Henry. I mean, he was just trying to do too much. Like, it happens. He's back there. He's not used to being back there. He was just trying to make a play. You can't fault him for that. But on certain ones like that, it'd be better suited probably just to let it go. But, I mean, he was trying to save field position. He was trying to make a play. But, I mean, it still happened. And then, of course, 2 kickoffs out of bounds. I mean, I was just not happy with that. I was very unpleased. I mean, and it's like you said, 4 in the last 2 games. And, I mean, really? And, like, here's the thing. Even if the guy can't kick it deep, why were you trying to squib every one of them? Like, why were they all, like, 2 feet off the ground? I don't understand that. Like, Lefevre, he kicked them deep when they put him in there, and they weren't, like, he kicked them high. And, like, they still, I mean, even if they landed at the 10-yard line, that at least gives your kickoff covered team a chance to make a play. I mean, instead of setting them up at the 35 every time. So I just did not understand that at all. That cannot continue to happen. But, I mean, yeah, special teams were – I mean, I guess you could maybe say C+, but at least because of that one forced turnover. But I was not very impressed, so I'll just give them a C.
I mean, look, the turnovers cancel each other out. You get one, but you give one. So, but I've got a general question to ask. And if there is a strategy to this, then I just don't know what it is. But if your goal is to kick the ball into the end zone anyway, then why are you aiming for like the M in Marshall, and why instead of like the S in Marshall? Yeah. Why not just kick it straight ahead, a straight line through the back of the end zone? Why try to kick it towards the sideline? Like, what are you hoping is going to happen? I just don't get that. I mean, if there's a strategy behind that, okay. But if there's not, if you got the leg to put it in the end zone, then why not kick it as far away or as close to the middle of the field as you possibly can to take away any chance of an illegal procedure call and getting the ball in the 35? I mean, I'd much rather get the ball in the 25 than the 35, But, it is what it is. We've just seen too many of those, so we'll see what that looks like going forward. But, gifting free yardage on kickoffs is just not something you want to have happen. All right, coaching effort this week. We've talked about all the stats. We've talked about all the other stuff. Now let's talk about, the fact that these coaches fully get it. They get what this game's all about. They prepared their kids appropriately. The position coaches were tweeting about, what it means and all that kind of stuff. They got the level of intensity for the situation this week, and they all came out prepared, and multiple groups did a phenomenal job. And we've done this on the podcast before. The OC, Tim Cramsey, the DCs, JC Price, Brad Lambert, and Doc Holliday, of course, they're going to get all the recognition because that's just kind of where the recognition goes. But for the second time this season on this podcast, I'm going to give a singular personal shout out to Dallas Baker and the job he's doing with those wide receivers, because it has not been more apparent than it was this week that those guys are elevated to a different level. Think about all the guys that are out. Brock Thompson's out. Talik Keaton out. Willie Johnson just came back from injury, so we really don't know if he was 100% or like 90.
And he got dinged up again.
And then he got dinged up again, and he still has a career day. Corey Gamage is – I just feel like if Corey Gamage can continue to laser focus on working his craft and reaching his potential, it'd be a really dangerous weapon for Grant Wells for years to come in this conference.
He's got next.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you want to compare him to somebody from just a couple years ago, he could be the next Tyree Brady. If you want to go a couple of years earlier than that, he's your next Aaron Dobson. And if you want to go even further back, maybe he's your Darius Watts. It's highly doubtful he'll be your next Randy Moss, but who in the hell is going to be the next Randy Moss? We're still waiting to see one of those anywhere. But yeah, Corey Gamage has definitely got a really, really positive future ahead. So what do you got for the coaching staff this week?
I echo everything you said about the coaching this week. I give them an A. I thought they were extremely good. I mean, especially considering the fact that this is not like any other game. Like, this is, the most emotional game you're going to play all year. No team in the country plays a game like this. No team in the country has a game with this much emotion wrapped up into it. The introduction for the game is different. It's everything's a different vibe, a different feel. The team handled the emotion well, which has to be accredited to the coaching staff to get them ready to go. Doc even said that a lot of that stuff in the first half. They said he said that they looked a little too tight in the first half, and like you could tell, like I mean that has to do with the circumstances and the magnitude of the game that they're playing. So I mean, but to their credit, they turned that around. They got it turned around. They took the pass when Middle was trying to take away the run. They absolutely figured out how to beat them through the air. And let's be honest, in the recent years, whenever Marshall hasn't been able to run the ball, they have not always been able to beat you through the air like that. I mean, so that's a big, big plus right there for Marshall moving forward. And that's going to keep teams off balance and keep them honest for sure. So great stuff there. Swarming, the defense swarms again. I mean, if you wanted to just look at one word to best describe the Marshall defense this year, swarming is the word to me. I think everybody on that defense they just have a nose for the ball. They just know how to make plays. They know how to just get into play every time. It's that good, and that's what they did again. You know, they had a tough assignment dealing with that quarterback and dealing with that tricky offense, because the offense is going to get quite a few yards because of the offense that they run and how fast sometimes they go. They're going to get some yards, but it's just trying to limit them from scoring and getting in the end zone, and they did that. So great job there. They came out at halftime strong. Got to give the coaches credit there. They played a lot better game in the second half than did in the first half. So really good stuff there. I think everything into taking all that into consideration, you got to give the coaches an A.
I mean, the score indicates all it needs to, really.
Yeah.
42-14, ending a 2-game win streak, keeping a firm grasp on the Conference USA East Division. So let's look away from 75 week and look at those things too. You know, Marshall's still playing for a title. They're still trying to be the top-rated G5 team at the end of the season. They still got New Year's Six Bowl on their sites. It was a big week away from football, yet centered around football. But then when game time came around, the coaches absolutely did probably one of the finest jobs of making an in-game adjustment that we've seen. Overall this week, what do you got for the Herd on 75 week?
Yeah, overall, I'll give him A-. The only reason I say A- is because the first half was a little rocky. You know, it kind of just left a little sour taste in your mouth at times, just because like it was a little bit slow start. But that's happened the last 2 years. I was going to say this or tweet it or something, but it just never got out. But the last 3 years for this 75 game, it didn't happen this game, but the last 3 games in this 75 game, Marshall's falling behind 7-0 each game. Okay, we got to realize that it's hard to come out and play sometimes in a game like that because there's just so much riding on it. And, you know, you're going to press a little hard. You're going to try sometimes too hard. Going to try to put square pegs into round holes. You're going to try to do stuff like that. And once they settled in and let the game come to them like it always does, naturally, then there was no problems. And that's a big testament to the coaching to get them out of that funk. And that's a testament to the team to get out of that funk because they knew they were playing for way more than just themselves. They knew they were playing way more than just for the fans. I mean, it was bigger than that. I mean, we all know that. So, I mean, if it wasn't for that first half, or at least, let me rephrase that, about the first quarter and a half, that was pretty much the only rocky parts of the game. That would definitely be an A or maybe even A+. But just because of that, I'll give them an A-. Still a very good performance.
Yeah, they had a solid performance for sure. And once you talk about the fact that Marshall never trailed in this game again, Middle Tennessee was able to get to 7-7. They answered Marshall's first touchdown with one of their own. It was all Herd from then on. I mean, it was all Herd. So this is absolutely a phenomenal type game that you wanted to see played this week of all weeks. You're hoping in the back of your mind, like everything is going so good for Marshall in 2020. It would be a terrible, 2020 type thing for them to come into 75 week on the 50th anniversary and either have the off game that we are accustomed to seeing historically from Marshall teams, not necessarily on this week, but at some point during the season, we always seem to see that. And it would just be the most inopportune time for that to happen would have been this past weekend. And it didn't happen. I mean, it was business as usual for Marshall. Middle Tennessee was just another speed bump on the road to a championship is what it seems like. And as we look forward to what's going on, with the Herd schedule for the remainder of the season, if they can just play their game, they look like they can be a 10-0 team waiting to see where all the dust settles. Charlotte is coming to town. We will talk about that in a few minutes. But before we get out of here with this preview or with this recap, we got to just lump all those coincidences together because, people say, you might say, well, look, the mind sees what it wants to see. And to a certain extent, that's fine. But when you're talking about statistics,
yeah,
it's numbers. It's right there. It's like you can't just want to see that. It is there. And you mentioned it on the in the Open on November 14th, 11-14. Marshall is now 7-0, 11-14, 70. That's a thing. That exists. Okay. You don't want to see that. That's what it is. I mentioned Brendan Knox's 100-yard consecutive game streak ending, and he tallies 70 yards. Again, the number pops up. You mentioned Marshall runs 75 offensive plays. They were playing for the 75. Each man and woman on that plane got to play on Saturday. And, of course, the one that you haven't mentioned yet that somebody mentioned to me in passing last night was that Marshall tallied as a team 75 penalty yards, Trace. So, these things pop up. And, of course, I talked about the fact that you hadn't seen a 100-yard receiver since 75 week the year before in 2019. I mean, it's just those weird plays that during the game, only seem to happen during 75 week, or you don't see them all season for Marshall. And then a cluster of them happen like, two muffed punts or 3 fumble recoveries or, something like that. I mean, it's kind of wild. These things don't usually happen, but Marshall takes it up a notch during 75 week. We all know that. And if you're the team on the schedule for 11-14 or close to that day, I don't envy you. And I didn't envy Middle Tennessee, and I still don't. How about some final thoughts before we transition into – we'll take us a little break, and then we'll do the Charlotte preview. So what do you got?
Oh boy, this was a big one this week. It really puts everything into perspective every year, but this year especially, I took it in more. I really did. I really wanted to take it in more. It just with how this year's been so far, it meant a little bit more this year, and especially because it was the 50th anniversary. I mean, that's a huge milestone year. Only happens once. There will never be another 50th anniversary. I mean, it's special. It was very special to see it all. I wish it would have been a normal amount of people that could have been at the fountain ceremony, but, I mean, you understand why they did it like they did it. But, I mean, besides that, though, I mean, everything was just so well handled. They handled everything so well. I mean, it was just exceptional to see how they did it, how they turned campus into their own, victims up on the campus and stuff was awesome. The fact that they won the game as well as they did, the fact that they played as well as they did for most of the game helps. I mean, they're able to do that in they're able to do that every year since they've really started this, and that's huge. I mean, that's a big thing because, like you said, you just can't lose this game. Marshall hasn't even really came close to losing this game. So you got to really appreciate that. You got to appreciate how much the fans bought into it. Like I said, seeing all kinds of fans at the different locations and stuff was cool to see. Everybody paying their respects, everybody honoring the 75 victims and everything. I mean, that's what Marshall football is all about. And that's what it means. Like I said, like we were saying, it means that much to everybody that they want to go out of their way like that to do that kind of stuff. And it really resonates with, it resonates with everybody just to see how important it is. And especially when you start seeing outside people focus on it as well, that also says that, it's a big deal and, it's special to see. So it was definitely one of the most fulfilling, I guess you could say, Marshall sports weekends that I've ever had for sure. Seeing We Are Marshall in the theaters on Friday night at Pullman Square was cool. Even though I've seen it 100 times, it's still cool to see it like that. Just from top to bottom, though, it was something really special to talk about for a long time.
A couple of things that I've got to mention that we have yet to talk about was the fact that 4 players from the 1970 East Carolina team were at the fountain ceremony, were at the game, guys that played against those Herd players that just hours later would perish in a plane crash. And I'm sure that was really emotional for those guys. I'm sure it was something that they maybe felt drawn to do, given that it was such a milestone anniversary. And it was really refreshing to see those guys there and, take part in the fountain ceremony and be at the game and all that kind of stuff. And that was pretty special. I'm not going to lie. That was pretty special. And the last thing I want to mention is I got to give a really special shout out to Zach and the Herd Equipment staff. They just had those boys looking real sharp for that game.
Yeah.
The apparel that the coaches had on was really, really cool. I was totally digging the, throwback hats, the white hat, green bill with one of my favorite M's on it. Looked like a sharp hat. The shirts with the fountain that says "They Shall Live On" was really nice. I mean, Herd Equipment just is one of the finest in the country, bar none. And to see what they put out for this game was, that was pretty awesome. I mean, those all black uniforms look super, super sharp, and those helmets always look super, super sharp. And, we'll beat this horse until there's nothing left to beat. But, man, if the Herd ever decides to go all black, helmet and all, look out. They might score 500 points that game. I know
Twitter will cease to exist.
Yeah. I mean, they could crash the internet if they ever do that. But they looked really good. So shout out to Herd Equipment. They had those boys looking good. They were fired up. You could tell, they looked good and they played good, and they did a good job. So shout out to them. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to keep Trace in here, and we're going to talk about Charlotte coming to Huntington to face the Herd. Is this the trap game again, Trace? We'll find out. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.
The snap to Wells. Deep drop for Grant. Guns at left side of the end zone. Wide open. Willie Johnson. Touchdown, Marshall. The Thundering Herd takes the lead. 7:18 to go in the first quarter.
Well, welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. We had a completely different second half to this episode. Trace and I, as you heard leading into the break, were about to record and actually did record a preview for the Charlotte game this weekend, but news broke and Charlotte at Marshall has been canceled. Now, we were planning to do this anyway. I was planning on bringing Casey Knopf back on the show so that he could recap his take from 75 week, not just the game and all that good stuff, but, he had such an eloquent, poignant, preview segment that it just felt like the right thing to do to ask Casey to come back on and bring everything full circle, because like you, he saw a lot of what we saw as far as, not just the performance on the field, not just the ceremonies around campus, but the outpouring of support across the nation, from fan bases, from various, if not every media outlet, and it was just nice to see that for a day, or at least for a part of a day, a lot of folks around the nation, and maybe to a certain extent around the world, took pause for a second and thought they would be a part of the Marshall fan base or the Marshall family for just a couple of minutes, or maybe just for a day. So Casey Knopf is back on the show, and we're going to talk about 75 week a little bit more, since there is no game with Charlotte this week. We'll see if something happens with that, but it's getting pretty late in the game. Tuesday is kind of late in the week to be springing something on an opponent, but we'll see. We'll see if something happens. So, Casey, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you back on. I'm really glad you had enough free time that you could come back and do this segment with me. I'm sure everybody that listened to your segment in the preview, which I know a lot of folks did, I was told that a lot of folks did, and they really appreciated how your openness and your candor and your willingness to kind of let the emotion take you where it took you. They appreciated that, because a lot of those folks, as I said, feel the same way. So it's really good to have you back on and give you the opportunity to bring this full circle. I'm sure there's a lot more stuff that you want to say, not just on a memorial kind of down note, but a lot of happy stuff too. So welcome back.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me come back. I appreciate the support. I didn't get clowned on Twitter for crying. That's always nice. I didn't get memed. Yeah, no, I didn't think so. But, no, yeah, like you said, today is it's good. We get to talk about this past weekend. We got to see, the amount of support and people across the country that decided to be Marshall fans for a weekend. I mean, you saw it. I saw it. I mean, it was awesome. It was really nice to see. So I'm pumped for this episode. I'm glad that you all let me come back. It's always fun doing this. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's talk about the day, earlier in the day. There was a certain mood that is always around Huntington, and it's kind of a weird thing to try to describe, because on one hand you have all of the emotion and you have all of the feelings of remembrance and respect and the solemn type of emotion on one hand, and on the other hand you've got people, the same people are also jazzed up that they're getting ready to go watch a Herd football game, and the energy that goes along with that. And it's really this yin and yang kind of thing that really nowhere else in the country has the opportunity to experience. So let's talk about the mood around town. Of course, I wasn't around town. You, of course, were around town. And talk to me about the mood, the feeling, the tightrope balance of all that. There's a lot of hype, but there's also a lot of solemn moments going on, and it's hard to sometimes you kind of feel bad for feeling good for a minute. And then you realize, hey, I'm supposed to feel good. This is also a time of celebration, a celebration of rebirth of a football program, a celebration of picking yourself up and pressing forward, while also remembering the ultimate sacrifice that folks paid for this program. So talk to me about, early in the day before we start talking about the game.
Well, I think as a Herd fan, like this game it's like you said, it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, the beginning of the game when the team links arms and stuff and they walk out on the field, I mean, you almost feel like you're at a funeral, kind of. Everyone's quiet, you've got that video on the board and you're seeing all the guys' names, the pictures, and but then Thunderstruck plays, and as a Marshall fan, you know that when Thunderstruck plays, that brings out a certain mood in you. So I even pregame too. I was on my way to the game. I'm listening to Thunderstruck. I've stopped at a red light. Steve Cotton tweets. He tweets a picture of the field, and it's just fog. Like you can see he's in the press box. You can see a little bit of the stands, but it's just fog, and it's like, I mean, if that doesn't set the stage for what this game is, like, yeah, it just gives you that eerie feeling almost. And I think it almost like plays to how the game started, like it was really slow to start the game, which is, I would say, uncharacteristic of Marshall football this year. They usually are pretty fast starters, yeah. And that's kind of, I think, plays into it, right? I mean, it was emotional in Huntington, West Virginia that morning. It was just a lot of people. I went to Glenn's on Friday, and it's like the whole window is a picture of the 70 team. We won't forget and stuff like that. I mean, there was a lot of those sentiments around town, and as it should be. But yeah, I mean, it was this weird, like 50-50, like it's game day. You're trying to, Thunderstruck's blaring, you're trying to get going, but then you're also remembering, like, what this day means, how far we've come, which is, I mean, that was also really, really like prevalent Saturday. When you're looking around and you know that 50 years ago to the day we didn't have a football team, and then you're at the stadium, and not only do we have a football team, but they're ranked number 16 in the country. They're really, really good. And it's, dude, I don't know. It was like, it was one of the better feelings Saturday. It's weird to say that, but like, as a fan, to know how far we've come and what the product that we put on the football field, it's really, it's something that I hope every Marshall fan takes pride in, because this is awesome.
It's absolutely rarefied air. Marshall has climbed in the polls before, and they've been ranked before. But let's face it, right now, there are a handful of teams throughout Marshall history that people always go back and talk about. And it depends on your era when you were, most connected, let's say, to the team as to where you'll go first. Some folks will immediately go to 2014 and say that's the best team we've ever put on the field. Then there are still others that'll say that's 1999. That's the best team we've ever put on the field. They were number 10 in the country. How can they not be the best team we've ever put on the field? And then still yet there are a few people that'll go, well, it's 1996. That's the undefeated 15-0. If we were FBS at that time, we still may have run the table. You can't take anything away because it was an FCS team. So Marshall has had great teams in the past, but this team is poised to put themselves potentially, if not definitely, in that Mount Rushmore of herd football teams, the four greatest ever, on an individual season basis. This 2020 team really, really has something special going on. And what is wild is, my parents, they still live up in West Virginia, and they don't, my mom doesn't keep up with sports whatsoever. And she asked me, she knew it was a 75 week, as most West Virginians do. And she said, is Marshall game on TV? I said, yeah, you'll have to look for it. It's on whatever. And she said, well, I don't have that. Okay. Well, anyway, she was able to find the game, and she said, well, are they any good? Are they going to win this game? I said, they should win probably close to by 40 points. This is, of course, well before what the game was. And during the game, she texted me and she's like, wow, they look really like a good team. I was like, yeah, I told you. I was like, they're number 15 for a reason. They're pretty damn good. And she continued to watch the game. And at the end of the game, she was like, wow, I did not expect, Marshall to be very good. Or not to be very good. She said, I didn't expect them to be that good. They were just unbelievably fun to watch. And I said, yeah, I told you. So even, some folks aren't aware of just how good Marshall is, and they live there. They live around the area. So Marshall's definitely in rarefied air. And look, Trace and I talked about the slow start on the preview, and I think, or on the wrap up, and I think we nailed it down. I think we figured out what it was. And it really centers around Grant Wells. As great as he played, and ended up being, now that we know, Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week again. He was added to the Davey O'Brien midseason award watch list after the game. Marshall ended up being the, Football Writers Association Team of the Week. I mean, all that stuff. So that all centers around how well he played and other guys played. We think that the slow start can be attributed to the fact that he's still a redshirt freshman, a first-year starter in his very first 75-week game. And it just so happens to be the 50th anniversary. Potentially, a lot of folks are saying the biggest game that Marshall has ever played. And, I can see that argument. But look, you can't tell me the emotions weren't riding a little bit higher. The adrenaline wasn't pumping a little bit harder. So that could contribute to a little bit of a slow start. But, man, once he settled in, look freaking out. So good. I did shout you out on the wrap up. I didn't think you might not necessarily be able to make the show. So I did shout you out saying what a great call by Casey picking him as a 200 proof player, because wow, man, absolutely dazzled. So look, let's bring it into the game now. We can talk about some good things. We know what the morning was all about. I watched some of the live stream of the fountain ceremony. It was absolutely well executed, beautifully done. The only downfall that I can say is that that place would have been shoulder to shoulder had it been available to do that. And that's the big bummer. Is that there? It was invite only, and a lot of people would have wanted to be there. But other than that, it was beautifully done, beautifully broadcast. Excellent job by Marshall. So let's talk about the freaking game, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. And slow start be damned, 42-14. There's not a lot you can take away from that other than the fact that Herd dominated front, top, side and backwards. This was Herd from the get-go. Being down there as close as you were to the action, you can speak to things that we don't even consider. You're hearing the little conversations on the sideline, just a little passing by after a big play, those type of things that are being said, or the mood on the sideline. So talk to us about a completely different perspective of what's going on top of how well Marshall played.
I think they felt the slow start. I mean, how do you not? They definitely knew that it was kind of what I said last week. Last week I kept saying, and I kept saying no disrespect to them, but as long as Marshall plays their game, they're going to do whatever they want to pretty much anybody, especially in the conference.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what the sentiments were on the sideline. It was just like, we're not playing our game. We can't get a rhythm. And the thing is like, this team isn't a team that like hangs their heads. They're not on each other. These guys pick each other up after every single bad play. If somebody does something wrong, there's no yelling, there's no fussing. It's, you did this, next time do this. And the player who did the wrong thing is like, you're right, that's what I need to do. There's no back and forth. That's how you, that's a winning culture. That's how you win. And that's how, when you start slow, you pour it on when you get it rolling. I mean, I never heard anything on the sideline of, you know, or anything like that when Middle was, you know, respect to them. They played a good game of football in that first half. I mean, it wasn't just that Marshall didn't play well. A huge credit to them. They played pretty decent football. But that defense, I don't know if anybody saw Tavante's Instagram, but he posted, Middle Tennessee posted a video of Asher O'Hara last year threw for 300 plus yards or something, like went crazy against Marshall. And Tavante posted that. And then on the next picture, he posted the Michael Jordan meme where he said, and I took that personally.
No, but I'll tell you this, from being able to watch the game at home, the broadcasters doing that game continually talked about this like rivalry, this personal player-to-player rivalry between Tavante Beckett and Asher O'Hara. And I'm like, guys, that does not exist. Like, you've got to be kidding me.
That's like, Tavante and every quarterback, though. Exactly. Every week, Tavante's new rival is whoever the quarterback is of the other team.
But that's what they kept talking about. Oh, O'Hara had a great game last year, and you know the Marshall defense really had fits with him, and I'm thinking, okay, guys, you're really trying to drive this non-existent storyline into existence, because there's none of that. It's not like they have pictures of O'Hara hanging up like, oh man, we can't wait for this guy to come to town. This is not what they're. No. Please.
I just think if I don't know that any other team or social media account runners for Charlotte, FIU, Rice, and whoever we may or may not play in the conference championship, I just wouldn't tweet out videos like that anymore, because you're just don't give more fuel to these guys. Like, what are you doing?
What do they got to lose? I mean, they've got nothing to lose. They're going into a game that they're probably going to get obliterated in, which they did. So why not try to take them off of their game a little bit and be like, hey, if we pull this out, we're going to look really good. And it doesn't matter, because you're a 2-win ball club. You know, you're garbage. I mean, I hate to tell you, I don't have to be polite. They're garbage. They're a garbage squad. They got two fluky, even their own like fans, like, you know, their blog writers, they'll tell you they got fluky wins. They did. They got two fluky wins. They're not a good ball team. Who did they beat?
Yeah, who did Middle beat?
I think they beat UTEP and Florida International. Without looking off the top of my head, I think that's who that we talked about. And they were fluky wins. But I'll go back and check that real quick while we're talking. But they're just not that good. And, you know, now that Middle Tennessee is a 6-loss team, I don't know if you knew this. One day, if I ever make it big and I need an agent, I'm getting Rick Stockstill's agent, because as mediocre as he has been, his contract gives him an automatic 1-year extension if he reaches 6 wins at Middle Tennessee. That's it. An automatic extension. So now Marshall's got them. They're sitting at 2-6. Middle Tennessee might have an out. They've got games against Troy and FAU remaining on the schedule, as does the Raiders. So you got to think one of those they're going to catch an L, and you know they might be able to get out from under Rick Stockstill if they're so inclined. Anyway, yes, Middle Tennessee beat Florida International 31-28 just a few weeks ago, and they beat. Where's the other one? Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't UTEP. It was UTSA. No, they lost to UTSA. Hold on. Who the heck did they beat? Oh, they beat Rice 40-34 in double overtime.
That's right. I remember that game, the double overtime.
Yeah, I knew it was a Texas team. So
was it Rice's first game too?
It might have been. I'm not sure.
Rice's first game back, and they almost beat him in double overtime.
Yeah,
I might be wrong.
No, you're right. Rice's record currently on the ESPN app is 0-1. So yeah, that was their first game back, and they took them to double overtime and won. So they're not a very good team, and I get that you have to preface things by saying you want to be respectful, but I don't. And I mean, I'm not trying to be purposefully disrespectful, but they're not a good team. So they had absolutely no cause to try to play it safe. I mean, they could do whatever they want on social media to try to rile our guys up and coax them into bad penalties or whatever can help their cause. And I don't think Middle Tennessee really played that well. They got lucky because Artie was trying to make a big play on a punt return and let the ball hit the turf. It happens. And that's a gifted touchdown. I mean, that's a gifted touchdown. So other than that, there is no off. They string together one drive for the entire game. That's it. They had no answer for Marshall defensively. They did do a good job stopping Brendan Knox. That was about it. And then what did we see? Willie Johnson has a career day. Corey Gamage has a tremendous stat line. Grant Wells has a career day. I mean, pick your poison, man. If
was talking about that too. He was like, he just said, that's why they're going to be so good. Is because, if you want to stop the run, go ahead. You can stop it. Then we're just gonna dice you through the air.
Yeah,
which is kind of why I picked Grant, because I know that it gets old probably, but everybody hears about Knox, and it's like, yeah, I mean, he's the best back in the conference. Sorry, FAU, it's not close. And if you want to stop him, you have to put your whole effort of your defense there, which means you're giving Grant a chance to do what he did to Middle, and that's go off.
Yeah.
I mean, his deep balls this weekend, he wasn't missing. Like
once he hit, he wasn't
once
missing.
He hit. Right, yeah. Right. I would say halfway through the second through the end of the game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, some of those balls I was just like, this guy's ridiculous.
Let me reel that in for you a little bit, because it's even better than that. It's midway through the second quarter or early second quarter through midway of the third quarter.
Oh, right.
Then you start seeing Luke Zaban get in the game. So he did his damage in 2 and a piece of a quarter. It wasn't 3. It was a career day and basically a little over a half of a game versus, So, yeah. And that just speaks to other things as well, like how deep Marshall is. It was a real question mark. Like, are these receivers going to be, capable coming into the season? And boy, have we not seen a complete 180 out of that room. I mean, guys have just elevated their game from top to bottom on the depth chart to the point that big playmakers like Talik Keaton and Brock Thompson aren't available to play, and still Grant Wells has a career day.
Yeah, I mean,
it's amazing.
Into that room, and Coach Baker's absolutely phenomenal. Those guys, I remember the EKU game, and I know you do too. I mean, Grant was, everybody was like, what the heck, this guy's, and we didn't even have Artie yet.
Yeah.
He was doing that without Artie.
Yeah.
I remember tweeting after the game, I was like, well, we get Artie back next week. I mean, if he was doing that with all these weapons, now he's got another guy that's quick out of the slot to go with Talik. I just think it's a testament to the coaching staff. They have everybody ready, next man up mentality. And, dude, it's so fun to watch. You just see, like, hey, I was watching the defense rotations, and it's like we sub like 4 or 5 guys on plays, and it's like they don't miss a beat.
Mm-hmm. Same
with offense. You got Xavier Gaines, who had a huge week last week and played good this week too. He's ridiculous. His athleticism, when he gets the ball, I mean, he's just going to make plays. That's what he does. But I mean, I really want Garrett Morrell to get back, get healthy. And then shout out to Devin Miller. I mean, Devin Miller also had, I think it was on the third down, he had a huge play to keep a drive going, which I'm pretty sure we scored off of. Guys like that step up when their number's called, like that, and that's at almost every position. We didn't have Kane Madden this week on the offensive line. We didn't run the ball well. I wouldn't say that's the offensive line's fault. I would say that's Middle Tennessee sending 9 people.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice to see this. You just feel like really good when you watch guys come in. Back in the day, with me growing up, it was like first string, we were just as good as anybody. Second string, we couldn't play with anybody. Third string, we might as well go somewhere else. It's like this year, and even in years past too, recently, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like we can go down the depth chart and still play with anybody.
Well, it's because that you can. I mean, it doesn't feel like that because it feels like that. It feels like that because you see it.
True.
I'm assuming that you grew up in the early Mark Snyder era. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Now,
buddy.
Let's put a little bit of a preface on that, because a lot of fans, that also were of age at that time will tell you, hey, Marshall was depleted in the depth because of a lack of scholarships and being on probation and things like that. And that's what happened. It killed the ability to build depth. And during that time, I've listened to a lot of Herd fans say, man, I watched so many leads just disappear on the final drive of the fourth quarter. We would be ahead knowing we had to trot the defense out there one more time to get a stop, and we couldn't get a stop. And that's not what we're seeing now, and for what we all like to put these big, banners up about, we were number 1 in recruiting in the conference, or we were number 2 in the conference in recruiting or whatever. And then when, Doc has a year to where he's like, man, they only made it to like 4th or whatever. And then you go, it doesn't matter because they're getting their guys. And you see that what you're talking about is a testament to that. Stars are only stars on a computer program, right? You still got to line up from across from another guy and beat that guy. And if you're recruiting the guys that can do that, well, your rankings don't really matter because you're going to win the matchups and ultimately win the games. So credit to those guys. They're recruiting the guys that they need to play the roles that they need. And credit to the senior leadership on Marshall's team, both sides of the ball, all 3 phases of the ball, who set the standard of like, all right, dude, you're going in now and playing my spot while I'm out. Production better not drop off. And I feel like that's, that says a lot about a team, that older guys are elevating the play of younger guys, and coaching staff is elevating the play and developing everybody. So it's just a different team. This is just a different Marshall team. It's good to see. Fun to watch.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
So I haven't watched much Middle Tennessee State football. I'm not gonna lie to you. Do they usually do the short stuff, the fast paced short stuff where they're just, is that normal? Is that typical?
I think so. I don't watch a lot of their ball either, but over the past few years, it seems to be what they like to do. They like to run tempo style offense with a lot of fast running plays. They rely heavily on the catch and run type offense. If you look at their playmakers over the past probably 5 years, 6 years, a lot of their receivers and backs are the same type of player. It's that 5'9" to 5'11", 180-pound burner, the Willie Johnson, Artie Henry type guys.
Yeah,
that's what they stock their offense with, and they like a lot of backs that can catch out of the backfield so that they can do that kind of stuff. O'Hara just brought a completely different element to their offense in the fact that he replaced Brent Stockstill, who was more of a passer. He was a lot like Wells. He could run if he needed to pick up a play, pick up a down, extend a play, something like that, elude a little bit, but he was more of a passer. O'Hara's a straight up dual threat guy, without a doubt. But yes, to answer your question, that's what they like to do. They like to do a lot of RPO stuff. They gashed Marshall a couple times with that RPO skinny post down the middle of the field for 12 yards. That's their bread and butter.
And I was like, it seems like I think it attributed to their success with some of their early drives, like. They were able to get a first down or maybe 2 on a drive and move the ball and then punt. But I just thought, eventually those guys are going to get tired. and eventually that Marshall defense is gonna cause problems. And I was kind of waiting. I thought that Sapp or maybe Gilmore was gonna just like jump one of those routes. I was waiting on it because it normally happens in that 75 game, doesn't it?
They come close. Yeah, they come. Well, last year, what was it? That was
it was Gilmore.
Gilmore went 100 yards, but it got called back.
That's right. It got called. I forgot about that.
Yeah. You see that, but that's the thing, and that's what helps keep Middle Tennessee successful against a defense like Marshall. I don't know if you saw it, but I saw it because the television cameras are following the ball, obviously. And at least three times, O'Hara got the ball away on a rollout pass, and milliseconds after the ball leaves his hand, Hodges putting him on the ground. I mean, that's any other quarterback or any other style of offense, and that's 3 sacks. It's because they're rolling him out and he's eluding the rush. So Hodges constantly have to get around the edge and then track him down. But it was so close all the time. And the other thing is incompletions kill that type of offense. You've got to get in a rhythm. It thrives on a rhythm. So Marshall did a good job of, some balls getting enough pressure that balls didn't come out good. They were incomplete. They fell short. Guys couldn't come back to the ball. Team speed for Marshall was the great equalizer. That's what it was. If that's a slower defense, Middle Tennessee picks up a lot more points and a lot more yards. You just got something real special going on in Huntington right now.
True. You're not lying.
I'm not lying. I mean, you look up at the end of the year, and if Marshall runs the table, it sucks that Charlotte came off the schedule, but they've got to get it back on. Well, they have to. I mean, that's an East Division race. Marshall and FAU, for all intents and purposes, are neck and neck. Even though Marshall has the tiebreaker, you can't lose an East Division game. You can't. And unfortunately, Marshall has Rice next week. Western Kentucky is supposed to play Charlotte next week. So you can't just say, well, whoever Charlotte's playing, we'll swap it in for Marshall next week. Can't do that. They're playing another East Division team. So right. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, they can't really move games back any farther. You're going to be into conference championship week. I mean, if they don't get played and it's not even, you might just be like, look, Marshall's freaking top 12 in the country and they're undefeated in conference. They're repping the East. And
I mean, I think it would come down. This is my opinion. Now, and this is Casey speaking. This has nothing to do with the athletic department. I have no clue what could happen or what will happen. But we beat FAU. If FAU is the team that's up there with us,
that's it.
Then we should be in. Let's say that La Tech is up in the top of the West, right? And I don't know that they are. I don't know if it's them or UAB or who it is. But let's say it's La Tech. But are we going to play at La Tech? We already beat La Tech at La Tech.
Right.
It should be in Huntington. That's where. Let's not have 2013 all over again. I think it's pretty clear. There's a couple FAU fans on Twitter that'll fight for it, but it's pretty clear that Marshall should be in from the East.
Right.
And that as of right now, the game should be in Huntington.
Oh, for sure. The standard Conference USA tiebreakers will back that up because head-to-head is first and foremost when deciding. All things considered equal, who won the head-to-head that's your tiebreaker, primary. But Conference USA, I saw a graphic several years back, and they have something like 7 or 8 different tiebreakers if things, like if the world catches on fire and they have to go down that deep. And they exercised all of those and then had to create one in 2013 when Marshall ended up going to Rice, even though they had the better, they were the better team. But I don't think it's going to come to that. And just to speak on your point about the West is wide open. It's basically a 3-team race, UAB, UTSA, and Louisiana Tech.
Wow, UTSA's up there.
Yeah, it's just they're UTSA's 4-1. They're 3-2 in conference. Louisiana Tech's 3-2 in conference, and UAB is 2-1 in conference. So most overall games played and best conference record is UTSA. They're 4-1 and 3-2 in conference. UAB actually leads the conference in the standings because they're 3-1 and 2-1. They've got one less loss in the loss column but one less win also. They've only played 3 conference games. UTSA's played 5. So that to me is kind of interesting. I don't know if they play each other sometime soon. They do not. Oh, they did. UAB won the head-to-head, so there you go. We'll see how it all lines out, but it's pretty wild. So, look, after you've had a couple of days to digest everything, and I'm sure you've reflected upon things because you've had to do projects that have centered around basically wrapping up the weekend. You've had a couple of days to digest everything. So where do you stand now with when you can look back on the entire weekend as a whole? What is it? Does it leave any type of different aspect versus a regular week? I mean, I know it does a little bit, but when you look back at it and go, wow, that was really awesome. Where does that rank for you, honestly, in your Marshall fandom? Trace, I'll tell you this. Trace told me, he said he thinks it's up there. He thinks it's the best weekend he's ever had, and he's experienced a lot of stuff. So coming from him, that carries some clout to me because he doesn't just say shit for hyperbole. He doesn't say stuff because he thinks people that listen to the show want to hear it. He's awful truthful. So where does this rank for you in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I'm going to speak from a fan, but I'm also going to speak from from my job, right? From making videos and stuff, because the video we made did extremely well, and we're proud of that, and we're thankful for that. I have never done anything that has even come close to that. So you add that in on Thursday and Friday, and then going into Saturday, man, it was a crazy weekend. You don't get much better than that, right? Like, you as a fan, we all felt it all week, and then especially Saturday morning. When you come out of that with a win, a dominant win, Sunday we move up in the rankings, one spot. So, when you have all that go down, and the amount of people that took notice this weekend. I mean, we've been ranked for really, I mean, technically, I won't count us falling out after the App State game when they brought in all those teams that hadn't played, but we've technically been ranked since App State, right?
Yeah.
It's not new. It's not new that we should be talked about on major sports networks. But this weekend, when everybody's talking about us, when Grant Wells is getting a helmet sticker on Sunday, it just feels good. I really hope that the men and women that made the decision, the hard decision on whether Marshall should continue to play football in 1971, I hope after this weekend we made them proud. That I hope that we've won championships. We've done it all. You've alluded to the great teams. I hope that this weekend it really cemented it into place that we made the right decision as a school. We made the right decision as a town, and I think that everybody should be proud of that. We've come a long way, and if Trace said that it is up there, I mean, I would say this is probably number one for me.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been really cool to be there in person myself. So unfortunately, I can't say that. It was great to watch. It was great to experience, and it was great to see. And I will tell you that this week is what Marshall needed from a national stage standpoint for everybody else to kind of take notice and go, wow, this herd team is like really, really good.
Yeah.
Because it's been Coastal Carolina, it's been Liberty, it's been BYU and Cincinnati, and ho-hum Marshall has just been there steadily winning all week or every week, climbing the rankings, and everybody's like, well, there's Marshall. And now all eyes, to a certain extent, were on Huntington this weekend, and they were like, holy crap, this team's really good. Yeah, they are really good. The only thing that would have been the icing on the cake for me is if Marshall would have landed at 14 in the polls instead of 15. Mm-hmm. That would have been eerily awesome, but it would have been pretty cool. Let me ask you this. Trace answered the question. I didn't even say it. You know, I think he answered it just in his general discussion. And, you know, I'm not looking for a yes or whatever. I'm looking for an honest answer here. Do you think this is the biggest win in Marshall's program?
That's sentimental wise, probably yes. I think that God, I gotta be careful. Okay, so here's how I'll say this. I think the best way that we could possibly honor the 75 this year on the 50th anniversary is go win a championship in December. I think that's the way to do it.
Sure.
You win on November 14th, of course. We built up from nothing to win championships. I mean, there's no that motto is everywhere in Huntington. We play for championships here. And I think that you know, the national championships are huge. That's a little bit before me. I think so I would say if it's up there for sure. For sure it's up in the top. But I would say the national championships are up there. And then me personally, I would say the 2014 conference championship would be the biggest. And the reason I say 2014 is that, you know, we had some down years. We came from winning any and everything. We were dominant in the zone. Still are, by the way. Win percentage is stupid. I think that when you bounce back from the mediocre years we had from 2004 to 2012, and you go through Bobby Pruitt was there, and then you go through Snyder, Holiday comes in. When you go through that transition, the trouble we got in and all that, and your new coach wins, you know, that meant a lot. That meant a lot to me. I'm sure the people, the guys that are my age, that we didn't see a winning football team, man. We just didn't. And I'm not going to say anything about anybody. It's no one person's fault. We just didn't see winning football, and it sucked because we win every Saturday. We didn't miss. We never stopped going. But when you win, when your team's nationally ranked, and you're playing for a conference championship in Huntington in the zone, man, that feeling is tough to beat. So for me, it'll be November 14th. 2014 championship until December 18th, I think, this year. Foreshadow.
Well, I'll tell you this. I can let you off the hook right now because I don't feel like I have to be careful when I say this. As awesome as this win was, as awesome as the weekend was, this is absolutely not Marshall's greatest win in program history.
I mean, middle was not good.
Head, I don't care who the opponent is. I don't take into consideration that. I take into the account what it means for the program as a whole. Championships, bowl games, regular season game doesn't matter to me. It's what it means to the program as a whole. Is that what it means? Is to be your greatest win, it has to mean the most to your program, right? And to me, there is number one, and then there is a significant Mount Everest type drop off to number two. Okay. That's how big the gap is. And to me, the greatest win that will never be eclipsed in Marshall history happened on September 25th, 1971. You beat Xavier, your first win after the plane crash at home in Fairfield Stadium. That's the best, biggest, largest, most gigantic win in program history. If something is going to get the ball rolling, you can't be the winningest team of the 90s without winning a game. So you had to win the first one. And that to me will always be the epitome of Marshall wins. And I know there are a lot of people out there that might disagree with that, and you can feel that way. That's fine. But so far down the list at number 2, we can debate what that is, but that's number 1, period. That's number 1. Because, that kind of solidified finally that it drove home for a lot of people that, hey, we did make the right decision. We can win again, and I'm sure I wasn't around in 1971, but I'm sure the feeling of utter elation, the exhale, the collective exhale, the sense of pride and joy and relief and, all of that at the same time was like, we can do this. We can do this again. We can build back. We can rebuild ourselves. We can knock the dirt off and be bigger and better than we were. And now we see that 50 years later, we see a nationally ranked team defend their home turf on a milestone anniversary game against a conference opponent that had beaten them the previous 2 years in dominating fashion on all phases of the game and remain undefeated. There is no better story. I mean, Marshall's story as a program there is nothing better. What led to the creation of the story is of course terrible and tragic, and but nonetheless it happened, and the story doesn't exist if that doesn't happen. So Marshall has so much pride in its program, and rightfully so. I love this win. I love the fact that this means a lot and it means a lot for a lot of people. 50 years later, we can show that we are one of the best teams in the country. I get that. I get the symbolism. But for me, it's always going to be 1971, the win over Xavier, and then everything else.
That's completely fair. That's completely fair. I actually, what's crazy is, this is sad. That should have probably been higher up on my list.
It's okay. It's okay. Like certain people feel certain ways about different things, and what's important to you is what's important to you, and how you rank things isn't wrong, and like what I just said, some people will rank bowl wins and championships above, beating a ranked opponent or whatever. And that's fine. Or some people might be vice versa, but we're talking about a game where 2 unranked teams played in what was supposed to be a regular Saturday, and Marshall got a win. They were an underdog, and they went out and got a win. And what that ultimately means now, some 49 years later, we see the effects of, that was really the catalyst that started, wow, we can do this. And it was a lot of hard times for a lot of years. It took 15 years or something like that for Marshall to post a winning record. It wasn't until the mid 80s until that happened. And then, Marshall, for all the folks that say, we were the winningest team in the 90s, and they won more than anybody else. The record in 1990 was still hovering around 500. So to then go on a tear, play and win a national title just 2 seasons later, and then repeat that feat 4 years later, and then move to FBS the year after that and set the record for wins as a first year FBS program at 10. And then go on a tear, 11 wins, 12 wins, 13 wins, blah, 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 all through Heisman, caliber players and
keep talking to me. I love it. Keep it going.
But I'm just saying, I'm giving you the timeline of how this all goes. And it all goes back to September of 1971 and a last play win over a team from Cincinnati, Ohio, and Xavier. That's where it all goes back to. I could talk ad nauseum. I really could. I could talk,
I just love hearing it, man. Because I think some people don't know. Like, some people are like, Marshall, and it's like, oh, you don't know. Like, no, we were a powerhouse. Like, we were.
And to even be fair, there, like you just said, there are guys your age that don't know. They've heard the stories, but the games aren't readily available to go back and watch. There's no YouTube of library of games. There's somebody's actually going to have to get out a cardboard box full of VHS tapes, blow the dust off of it, and you might have the 97 MAC championship game or something like that you would have to sit down and watch on a VCR if you can find one.
I'll pay high dollar. Somebody let me know.
So I'm just saying, you can find snippets. You can find the Randy Moss highlight tapes, and you can find snippets from certain games and things like that. But it's just there are so many players that guys of your age and later that probably will never have heard of that were just phenomenal players. And I saw in some of the videos that I think it might have been the one that you guys put out, you had some clips of earlier years. And one of my absolute favorite Marshall clips is that tackle in the 97 whatever bowl game that was where Marshall played Ole Miss. That's Larry McLeod, linebacker, planted dude straight in the ground, like the textbook coming across the middle, planted you in the ground type hit. I love that. I watch it in slow motion numerous times a year. I love that hit. But Larry McLeod is a guy that, herd historians will know, but guys like yourself, well, you might know because you're close to the program, but other guys your age probably don't know the greatness of, linebacker Larry McLeod.
That was one of my dad's favorite players. That's why I put that clip in the video too. That's the luxury of having parents that raised me in this, right? This was I grew up every Friday night. I watched Running with the Herd, which was the Byron team doc. And we had turf from the before they redid the turf at the Joan. We had that in our house. Like, I was this is what I was brought up on. And I remember my dad was a big Larry McLeod fan. And I found the clip actually a couple weeks ago, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna tell my dad, but I'm gonna put it in there because I haven't used them before. I've never in any of my videos I haven't put them in. And I found it, and I was like, all right, I'll throw Dad a bone here.
Yeah. I don't remember what that guy's name was. Something French, I think, that he tackled. I'm not sure, but I used to know. It was one of those things like, man, that's the answer to a trivia question is who did Larry McLeod, insert into the Detroit turf? I used to know, but I don't know anymore.
I think my dad might have been at that game.
Yeah. So look, let's end this episode. This is going a lot longer than I thought it was going to. This may end up being its very own episode, which is okay by me. So let's get the heck out of here. It was a great weekend. It was a great win, a great experience. I've got to say thank you for all the content that you guys put out. It was really fun to watch. It was really meaningful and some of the best content that Marshall has ever put out, period. And I wouldn't have expected anything less during such a milestone occasion. So continued thanks and appreciation. The evergreen tweet from me personally, you guys do such a great job, and it's so much fun to watch. And I appreciate all the hard work that goes into it. It doesn't fall on, or it doesn't go unnoticed. I love watching everything that you guys put out. The caliber and quality that's coming out of the athletic department in those areas over the past couple of years has just been elevated so high. I wonder how you continually outdo yourselves, but you continually outdo yourselves.
Well, I appreciate that. I know we talk about it every week. It's something we continuously bring up. I mean, it's always for the fan base. Everything we do, we want the fan base to get what they deserve. You know what I mean? We have one of the best fan bases in the country. And we pride ourselves on that. We're trying to get better. We're not the best. But we're working on it. We're trying to get there. And that's the name of the game. Like I said, this is the best, the best thing that I've ever made so far. This video we put out last week. But the story sells it all. It's very little to do with me and a lot to do with that story. I appreciate all the support. The department appreciates all the support. I mean, we worked hard on it. But it doesn't stop here. We're literally just getting started. We've got big plans for the end of this year, and God willing, this COVID goes away. We've got some good stuff for next year too.
Well, hell or high water, the Herd's going to play for a championship.
You're damn right.
It's just a matter of what victim wants to trot into Jones C. Edwards Stadium and take an L for a small paycheck, I guess. If that's what it comes to, then that's what it comes to. But this team is really, really good. You can tell your immediate supervisors that, we are paying attention to the quality of the stuff that you put out, and we absolutely appreciate it. The hours that you guys are putting in behind screens and behind lenses and things is absolutely appreciated. And I can speak for a lot of people when I say that. We just, it's just really nice. I mean, I don't need that stuff, but it's one of those things that helps bring you closer to a team. You feel more attached to the team. So, thanks for continually working your asses off to put out things like that. And then the fact that you guys do it without having the luxury of, $1 million studio that some of these other universities get to play around with. It just speaks to the level of talent that you have. I'm not saying you guys don't have great equipment. We know that you do, but the fact that you don't have the luxury of having every single bell and whistle at your disposal, and the fact that you're putting out things that are better than what other larger programs or well-funded programs are doing, that just means that, once again, Marshall's winning the recruiting game. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Marshall's winning the recruiting game again off the field. So we're going to get out of here. I want you to stick around after I end the broadcast, though, because unless you got somewhere to be, I need about just maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Nope, I'm here.
All right. Well, it's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Appreciate you guys listening. Moff and I will try to get you what was that wrap up against? Gosh, I've forgotten who it was. Western Kentucky and God, who was that? That was a hard fought win. Oh, Southern Miss. That's right. They ended the game early. So we'll try to bring you the Western Kentucky Southern Miss recap as soon as we can get our schedules to line up. And basketball season's closing in. Moff and Trace have been hard at work getting you a basketball season preview ready to roll. So we're going to run down the rosters and break down everything that we can and get you pumped for basketball season. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.